In the early 2000s, it's safe to say that we were spoiled when it came to fantasy series. I mean, we're talking about absolute cultural giants like Harry Potter and The Lord of the Rings. But you know what those series didn't have enough of? Well, cats, of course. And if at the time you wanted something a little more edgy, something that not all those normies were into, you'd have to shop around a bit. And if you were a kid, you might walk into your library or bookstore, and then the answer would be staring right back at you, quite literally, when you saw these book covers with these weird close-up pictures of cat faces and wondered, what on earth is that? Well, it's Warrior Cats, the 20-plus-year-old franchise powered by maybe the single most large and passionate fan base of all time, complete with all the drama and chaotic noise that comes with it. Now, it's kind of incredible the staying power of this series, which at first glance is just about cats in a forest, but this was way more than that, and way darker too. Imagine a proto Game of Thrones, but with cats. But all of this and more made it absolutely addicting for all those edgy kids in school, and I of course was no exception. I loved these as a kid, and it's kind of amazing because even though I personally drifted away from the series as I grew up, I'd occasionally hear rumors of some insane and unhinged fandom moments, and it got me wondering what's been happening to the series in recent years. Well, it turns out a lot, like a lot, and the amount of insane, convoluted twists and turns in this franchise is truly something incredible, from fans forcing authors to quit to something called Ballgate, which is just as insane as it sounds. So in this video, I'm going to try my best to break down the convoluted history, its incredible and at times unhinged fan base, and where it's all at now to understand whatever happened to the Warrior Cats. Hi everyone, my name is Otto, and welcome to Exits Examined. We'll be exploring series, franchises, and more after their prime time has seemingly come to an end. If that sounds good to you, there's a like and subscribe button below. Okay, so there's a metric ton of stuff to get into with this franchise, and explaining the series to the unanointed can be a bit of a daunting task because things can quickly become insanely convoluted and complicated, but the basic premise is actually pretty simple. Warriors is a young adult book series written by multiple authors under the pseudonym Erin Hunter and has sold over 70 million copies. It's essentially about warrior cats in the woods with their own codes, religion, and of course the most fun part are the clans. Thunder Clan, River Clan, Wind Clan, and Shadow Clan. Each of them has its own unique vibe, and I think it's a huge part of what makes this series so much fun to get into. So here's your Warrior Cats 101. Thunder Clan is the brave, noble type, so imagine a whole squad of cat Captain Americas. Then there's Shadow Clan, who's stealthy and mysterious, so basically an entire gang of cat Narutos, and kind of the bad boys slash I can fix him types. River Clan are basically the Olympic swimmers, and Wind Clan cats are super fast and have a bunch of agility in fights. And oh yeah, there are a lot of cat fights. Speaking of that, there is this kind of fascinating duality in the series, because while it was geared towards younger readers, it delves into at times shockingly dark territory. These aren't friendly little scuffles between kitties, the battles are absolutely metal, with cats getting straight up eviscerated, sometimes in graphic detail, and that's honestly just scratching the surface. Fortunately, to avoid these bloodbaths, they do have a type of cat UN, and from time to time, all the clan leaders will meet to discuss news and grievances. Aside from this, the clans are united in their shared cat religion, which, oh yeah, cat religion. This is called Star Clan, basically spirit cat ancestors who say they will watch over the living cats and are kind of a guiding force, even if a lot of times they are maybe not exactly the most helpful. Basically, they'll communicate through the clans through signs and prophecies, but many times these prophecies are super vague and indirectly end up with a ton of cats being killed. Whoops. Anyway, the culture is also centered around the Warrior Code, basically the cat constitution, a set of laws that emphasize honor, loyalty, and bravery, but these frequently cause their own set of problems, like with one of the laws being essentially don't ever question the leader, which yeah, you can imagine how that goes. Speaking of leaders, yeah, there's different roles in your catocracy. Fortunately, the cat society is pretty easy to break down. You got the leader, who is of course the big boss, and if we're continuing my Game of Thrones reference, basically they are the heads of house, but they also get 9 lives from the Stark clan for being special. Then you got the deputy, which is the leader's right hand, who organizes patrols, makes sure everyone is doing their job, and occasionally, does the whole scheming advisor thing. The rank and file of cat society is made up of kits, the adorable furballs, cats in training, and warriors, who are the backbone of the clan. Another important thing to mention here is that as you progress through the ranks, your cat name will change to reflect this. There are also elders who are essentially in cat retirement, and pregnant cats who are called queens, which I think we should adopt in the human world as well. You also have your medicine cats, which are kind of like a mix between cat doctor and cat shaman. Now, importantly, it's not just cats in this world. There are humans, rats, badgers, and even mountain lions, all with their own motivations. There's also street cats, but they're not really a clan because they don't believe in the cat religion or follow the code. And of course, there are house cats, which are referred to as kitty pets. Now, this is where the very first series starts, with Rusty the house cat deciding to leave his luxurious life and join ThunderClan in the wild. Now, you may have noticed I said first series, which may be confusing because how can there be a series within a series? Well, to say Warrior Cats is enormous would be quite the understatement. Depending on how you count the books, there's over 90 in total, and it's kind of cute when people complain about long book series like The Wheel of Time, and then the Warrior Cats fandom is over here looking like Dirty Harry. Now, don't be stressed out if you haven't read them or can't read them all. In the words of Gandalf, there are few who can. But just out of the sake of morbid curiosity, let's break down this series. Now, there are 9 series called arcs in total, and each of these books usually around 300 pages, and these include Warriors: The Prophecy Begins, which was the first and released in 2003, then The New Prophecy, Power of 3, Omen of the Stars, Dawn of the Clans, which is a prequel and chronologically the first, A Vision of Shadows, The Broken Code, A Starless Clan, and finally Changing Skies, which is currently in the works and set to release. Okay, easy so far, right? Well, hold on, because outside the main arcs, there are also these things called super editions. Now, I had never heard of something being called a super edition before, but basically they are standalone novels that delve deeper into the lives of individual characters from the series. They're longer than most of the books in the main arcs, and while not always essential, they provide some unique insights and perspectives. Okay, so we have series and standalone novels, but like with everything in the Warriors universe, it's not that simple because we're actually not even halfway done yet. There are also novellas, which are standalone stories that focus on individual characters and backstories. Now, you might be thinking, hey, isn't that literally what I just said about super editions? Well, yes, that's right, but the key difference lies in their length. While super editions are typically 400 to 600 pages long, novellas are significantly shorter. Now, if you are still hungry for another sweet hit of fluffy warrior goodness, you don't have to worry because there are also field guides, which are basically reference books that give you extra info about the character and the world. And on top of all of that, there's a pretty large amount of short stories, and a number of these can be found online for free, so I'll link some of these below. So trust me, I know that can sound pretty intimidating for someone just wanting to dip their toes into the Warriors' water for the first time, and it can be kind of hard to know where to start, but it's actually pretty simple. Just read them in order, because otherwise you'll be extremely lost. The main series is basically just one long timeline split into different story arcs with different protagonists, and the Warriors Cat Wiki, which thank God this exists, also has a link listing every release in chronological order for those of you who want to read every single piece of Warrior media ever and get a gold star. The themes and the plots of the books themselves are actually pretty wild. We've got everything from forbidden love triangles to ancient prophecies, deforestation, cat superpowers, cat atheism, which by the way, cat atheism never made sense to me because like StarClan is real, their leaders have 9 lives. But I think at the end of the day, the world and the books have an overall hopeful tone and just enjoyable reads with a ton of really fun characters. Speaking of the characters, with each new series, there was a host of new ones, and the sheer amount of cats can be a little overwhelming. So much so that even the authors can't seem to keep tabs on them to the extent that they occasionally even forget which ones they've killed off. Now, this makes more sense if you remember that I mentioned Erin Hunter is not one author, but rather a collective. So Erin Hunter is a team of writers and editors who have collaborated on the Warrior series over time. They've always been pretty open about this, and it's pretty simple to figure out which author wrote which book. They're collectively called the Erins, but probably the most important Erin is Vicky Holmes, who basically creates and outlines the plots for each story arc and book. Then, two other Erins would actually fill in the details and write the books themselves. For various reasons, which I'll mention later, Vicky Holmes has since stepped away from the series in 2017, but even without her, the Warriors cat train is still going strong. Apparently, in the beginning though, it all started when publisher HarperCollins approached Vicky Holmes with the idea of writing a fantasy series with feral cats, but Vicky wasn't initially sold on the concept. I must confess I wasn't very keen at first because I don't read fantasy, and although I love all animals, I'm more of a dog person. But once I started working with the characters, I realized I could give them more human issues. Once I stopped thinking of the series as fantasy and just let the characters take me where they wanted, everything got much easier and the story started to tell themselves. Now, in large part because of this at times mess of authors, there are some issues with the series. The sheer number of books means that the quality can be a bit up and down. Sometimes the plots feel recycled and it feels like it's almost missing an overall editor. But it's safe to say that the writing isn't always the best. So what I mean by this is that the world is huge, which is great, but sometimes it feels like it collapses under its own weight. And this size means errors are bound to happen. Now, you might think, well, what's the harm in a few minor mistakes, like typos here and there? But the issue is that some of these are pretty major oversights. I brought this up earlier, but stories have characters who should already be dead and are just mentioned casually to be alive. Some characters are accidentally written to be both somehow adults and kittens in the same book, or important backstory details get completely forgotten. And it's frustrating when you get attached to a character only for the authors to treat them with major inconsistencies, and it's gotten to the point where it's just kind of a fact of life for the fanbase. Then there's the issue of overexposure, with some characters receiving way more attention than others. I'm looking at you, Mapleshade. And pacing problems can make certain books feel like a slog. Some books or guides, sometimes even redcon stuff, and it can all get pretty confusing, and that's a bummer for fans who have been with the series since the start of it. Then of course is the metric ton of characters I mentioned. Like, seriously, I never thought there would be a thing as too many cats, but yeah. A lot of them just kind of show up for a bit, then disappear, and it seems like even the authors can't be bothered with the details. A prime example of this is Dawnwings' eye color. Throughout a single book, her eyes are described as different shades, sparking endless debate among fans and landing the issue its own dedicated page on the Warrior Cats wiki. Speaking of the fandom, it's a massive part of what makes Warriors what it is today. They're the super passionate, super talented, and sometimes super unhinged grease that keeps this franchise rolling. Out of all the series I've covered, Warriors easily has the most vocal and active community I've ever seen, and when you take a step back, it's kind of fascinating. I mean, how could this 20-year-old book series about cats ignite such an active community of people from all over the world? And it really makes you wonder why Warriors has such incredible staying power. Now, of course, everyone will have their own reasons and thoughts, but I think a large part of it comes down to the sheer amount of characters, clans, and books in the series. Basically, because of how huge this world is, everyone can find something to love and hate. So in school, when kids played Warriors in recess and jumped around shouting about what clans they were, everyone could have a different character or clan. And I think it's really fun to have a world where people can use their imagination and really step into the franchise and pick and choose and make it their own. And it's all wrapped in this edgy, dark, but optimistic world, and with the icing of it being about cats. And who doesn't like cats? But regardless of the reason why this fandom is so huge, it's undeniable that they have done some remarkable things together. The most common is, of course, the fan art. From stunning digital paintings to simple little doodles, scroll through Reddit or DeviantArt and you'll find entire galleries of these. And seriously, some of these are amazing and really interesting takes on characters and cover art. And over the years, the community has been a great place to share work and encourage young artists. It's not all sunshine and catnip though. There have been some bumps in the road, like the infamous Clover Kit scandal. In a nutshell, a young fan posted art of their own character, which sparked both ridicule and a massive outpouring of support. Unfortunately, the attention was just overwhelming for the kid who made the art in the first place. But hiccups aside, the Warrior Cats community is largely welcoming, friendly, and bursting with talent. The official Warriors website even features fan creations, which is just great to see. There's also fan-made animations, which I'll bring up later, but while you're making your fan drawings, you can even listen to fan-made soundtracks, which is the first time I've ever seen this be a thing in a fandom, and it's pretty great. There are original songs and soundtracks from pretty much every genre you can think of. We're talking raps, musicals, and even country songs, with entire channels dedicated to it. And even though the books have their own issues, fans have rolled up their sleeves and stepped in to fix that problem. Fanfic is a huge part of the community, and there are countless stories that expand upon the world, characters, and plotline. There's probably a fanfiction for anything you can think of, and while a lot of these deal with fan-made characters, there are also hidden gems that stay true to the source material. The quality can be really good, and I'll share some of these down below in the description. But if all of this still is not enough for you, don't worry, because it doesn't even stop there. Fans made plushies, masks, comics, podcasts, fan websites, and it just goes back to what I was saying about there really is something here for everyone. And it's just so wholesome to see all the different talents of the community. But of course, everything goes both ways, and what comes up must come down. Along with the intense fandom comes intense, internet-fueled, mind-boggling drama. Although some of it is warranted, I will say. But you have everything from debates about cat genetics to the possibility of rabies outbreaks within the clans, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I've mentioned the Clover Kit controversies, Dawnwings eye color, and there's even this whole thing about how Firestar's, well, let's just say anatomy was depicted in certain fan art, more affectionately known as Ballgate. Now, I could go on and on about this, but other YouTubers already have, and this video is already massive as it is, so for those of you who are interested, feel free to do the research on your own, but be warned, it's a rabbit hole, and once you go down, there is no turning back. So sure, the insane history of the fandom dramas can make you question your sanity sometimes, but it's important to remember what's at the core here, a shared love for a book series. Even with the occasional downsides, there's something truly endearing about this community. And the authors actively engage with the fandom through Q&As, characters' names referencing fan usernames, and even essays explaining the series' intricacies. One of the most touching moments was in 2008, 10-year-old Emmy Cherry and her parents tragically lost their lives in a tornado. Emmy apparently loved the Warrior series, and Vicky Holmes was touched by the story and shared it on fan sites. The fans in turn gave Warrior names to Emmy and her family, and Vicky in turn gave them cameos in the books. And later, there'd even be a play written about them. And it's stories like this that really make you realize the power of the community when it comes together. But of course, fan interaction has its downsides. Criticisms have come up regarding female representation, relationships, and even ableism. For example, some characters can't become warriors due to injuries, and in some arcs, female characters can arguably be designated as side characters or solely as love interests, and these issues still spark debate amongst fans. Thankfully, the authors seem pretty receptive to feedback. Recent books show a clear effort to incorporate these critiques, and this really just again shows the power of the fanbase. However, it definitely has not all been smooth sailing, with the infamous Sue debacle adding fuel to the fire. Basically, to give a very brief rundown of this dumpster fire, in 2016, Vicky Holmes made a post about how she was entrusting a quote-unquote superfan, Sue Susan, to answer questions in the community, and that Sue's word was pretty much canon. Her first editions were pretty unoffensive, but then she started to make changes that some felt were a bit fanficky or far-fetched, and the fandom quickly turned against her. It turned into this whole mess with a ton of ugly back and forth. There was a lot of bullying of Sue and false reporting on things like Facebook, even though some of her contributions have been made semi-canon on the official website. Eventually, Vicky kind of backtracked and said, wait a minute, Sue's word was not canon, and following that, Vicky left the Warriors franchise, apparently due to a mix of reasons, leaving many fans heartbroken. However, she has made occasional appearances in the past few years and participated in contests and tours. But this isn't even the only case of the fandom turning on one of the authors. They literally made one of the Erins leave. Again, extremely long and controversial story short, Gillian Phillip was a self-proclaimed TERF, which means trans exclusionary radical feminist. So basically a female who rejects the position that trans women are women. Basically, she put "I stand with J.K. Rowling" in her Twitter bio during that whole thing. Now, a large part of the Warriors fandom is LGBT, and this resulted in a ton of arguments between Gillian and fans, and this went over about as well as you might expect. During this whole fiasco, HarperCollins quickly distanced itself from Phillip and eventually dropped her entirely. Okay, so let's take a quick break from all the drama and now turn to the world of Warrior Cat adaptations. And if you thought this would be any less convoluted or generally chaotic, then you clearly have not been paying attention. But let's start simple. The official spinoffs are Seekers, which is Warriors but Bears, Survivors, which is Warriors but Dogs, Bravelands, which is Warriors but in Africa, and most interestingly of all in my opinion is Bamboo Kingdom, which is Warriors but about pandas. And as a bonus, it's not an official spin-off, but there's also Wings of Fire. It was written by one of the Erins and has a ton of similarities, but is of course about dragons. Now, full transparency, I have not read the spin-offs. I know, fake fan, but by all accounts, the spin-offs seem to be pretty positive, though not anywhere near as popular as Warriors. Now, I'm just hoping we can start a petition for Warriors, but with rats, because these cute little guys were absolutely villainized in the original series, and it's a crime. Speaking of petitions, it's time to talk about the absolute drama with the movie, or lack thereof. Now, for a long time, fans have been vocal in their want of a movie, but unfortunately fans would have to wait and wait. Until on October 20th, 2016, Victoria Holmes announced that Alibaba Pictures had bought the production rights for a film adaptation, and at first, things seemed to be promising. A producer from Harry Potter was brought on board, and even a movie poster was made. Then there were a few more spouts of news in 2018, then nothing. And more nothing. But then, after years of silence, in 2024, it was announced that Coolibee Group signed a deal to create an animation of Warriors, which is pretty exciting, but we probably shouldn't get our hopes up until something more concrete comes out. But hey, at least there's been news within the past year. Vicky did later confirm, after the current deal was announced, that the Alibaba one fell through, although looking at the Coolibee Group's current works is pretty interesting because these include a 17-season show called Heartland, which is, quote, Canada's longest running 1-hour drama, so make of that what you will. But even though there is a severe lack of warriors in the TV/movie space, don't worry, because like with everything else in this universe, the fandom will roll up their sleeves and do it themselves. So these include maps called multiple animator projects where fans basically band together to make animations for a soundtrack, and some of these are amazing, and these include The Five Giants or StarClan's Chosen. Animation just seems to be a huge part of the fandom, and it's truly impressive the amount of work and dedication the community has put in here, and there are countless examples of full episode series like SSS Cats, which recreated the first few chapters of the first books, and Amelia B, who made this crazy 90s style intro, and Little Dragon Studios, which did a 3D version of Into the Wild, complete with voice acting, and it's mind-boggling how much work must have gone into these. Although interestingly enough, some of these, like the one done by Little Dragon Studios, has been requested to cease and desist by the authors, and the line is kind of tricky, with the official website saying that, quote, they reserve the right to request that you stop sharing content if they consider that it oversteps into copyright or trademark infringement, but I'm assuming that this probably has something to do with the upcoming animation. Okay, so aside from the movie and animation, we also have graphic novels in the universe, or are they mangas? So this was a point of complete confusion for me because the official Warriors website currently lists these as mangas, with the one exception of Prophecies Begin, which is listed as a graphic novel, but the wiki lists all of these as graphic novels. Now, I think the entire reason they were called mangas is a bit confusing in the first place because they aren't in the typical Japanese style or read right to left, but I think in large part this is because they were originally made by Tokyopop, and this has sparked a ton of debate in the fandom as well. With the rise of graphic novels, I think the team realized that the manga label is confusing, so with the newer ones like Prophecies, they're switching to calling them graphic novels. Anyway, I guess it's just semantics at the end of the day, but another fascinating nook and cranny of this franchise. All that aside, the ones I read were pretty enjoyable, but most of them are side stories, so not like required reading. But it's a joy to see the characters in a visual format. Now, a whole other part of the franchise is the Warrior games, with probably the largest being the Roblox game that might be the closest we have to an official experience, and it's even listed on the Warrior Cats website. The game boasts decent graphics and is a major upgrade from the fever dream visuals of the older Roblox Warrior Cat titles, but it's definitely not without its problems. Roblox unfortunately doesn't have strict enforcement of roleplay rules except for the usual no swearing policy, and this can lead to messy roleplay experiences, with a lot of players not even understanding the Warrior code. Thankfully, the game helpfully includes the code in the menu, but enforcement remains an issue, so it can be kind of hard to roleplay when a bunch of people are just running around doing their own things. While the graphics are a step up, they can feel a bit strange too, and at times a little derpy, but it can be charming. If Roblox isn't your thing for any number of reasons, there's another project called Clans Divided, and it's been in development since 2018 and was an unofficial fan-made game. Currently, it looks like the creator might have abandoned this project sadly because not even all the elements that were planned have been finished. But as far as I know, it was only one person who made it, which is kind of amazing, honestly. And although it doesn't bear the official Warrior Cat's name, Cattails is by all intents and purposes a Warrior Cat game, which originated as a Warriors fan game by Falcon Development called Warrior Cats Untold Tales. And my favorite thing about this was looking at the comment section for the reviews, and one was, quote, "This game is for anyone who grew up obsessed with the Warrior Cat series, except the names are only half as long." But yeah, it's kind of like Stardew Valley meets the Warriors and is a cute little fleshed out experience. There's also Clan Jin, which is another fan-made game where you can make your entire clan and has this really cute pixelated looking charm. Then for all the OG heads, there is Warrior Cats, the original game on PC, which has kind of got Pokemon vibes, and you can still play it, but you do need an activation code, but these are still floating around in the world. Speaking of older titles, there was also New Prophecy Quest, which was a Flash game and as such is no longer available on the website. However, it is still playable in the Flashpoint archive, so you can relive your childhood. Now, there was a whole slew of these Flash games on the official website, including Warriors Match, Warriors Connection, Warriors Hunting Game, just to name a few. As far as modern official games on the website, they do exist, but they're not exactly high fidelity, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's Warrior Cat's Medicine Mission, which is a free online game and surprisingly fun, and it's nice that they gave a spotlight to the medicine cats finally. And this one's not really a game, but there's also Warrior Cat's Mini Maker, so you can make your own cat, and I had a ton of fun at making my edgelord of a cat. As far as unfinished projects, there was even work being done on an official MMO Warrior Cats Online, which honestly I would totally play a WoW style game where everyone is in different clans. Vicky Holmes herself even announced it in a newsletter in 2009, going as far as to send out surveys to fans, but it seems like it never panned out and just got stuck in development. Outside of video games, there's playing cards and even a D&D inspired adventure game that was a bonus to some of the books, but it was a bit confusing to play, but it had things like character sheets and rule books which are still on the website. And because literally everything has to have one, there was even a mobile app, but just like everything else in this franchise, it's not that simple because there's actually two. In 2011, the OG one was released and it was basically a reference guide and trivia game, but it was later taken down. But don't fret, because in 2020, a mobile application version of the website, also known as Warrior Cats Hub, was published, but it's not really an app, it's more of a recreation of the website, which is a pretty interesting choice. I'm personally not sure why someone would download an app of a site when you can just use your browser, but if someone can explain, please let me know. And in the meantime, I'll just chalk it up to another confusing thing about this franchise, I guess. At the end of the day, there's just so much depth here, from the books themselves to the incredible fan creations I haven't even had time to go into, and it really speaks to the incredible staying power of the series. With over 20 years under its belt, you might expect the series to start losing popularity, especially considering the mixed reception to some of the recent book releases like the 2023 reprint of the Ultimate Guide. But The fan base remains strong, and the series shows no signs of slowing down. New books and graphic novels continue to be published, events are still happening, merch is still being made, and the television adaptation is finally looking to be on the horizon. Well, maybe anyway. And it's hard to imagine this happening unless there were still people interested in it. It is kind of fascinating because The Warriors was originally only intended by Vicky Holmes to span the original 6 books, but it's ballooned into this unstoppable cultural cat juggernaut. It's true that people have left or moved on from the series, but it seems like this is balanced by new generations getting into it. Don't get me wrong, the writing and the series as a whole has had its ups and downs, but I think it's only natural for something as long running as the 20+ years here, and this is reflected in how the landscape of the internet has changed too. Instead of online forums, people now use Discord or Reddit, and it's only natural for something to change and evolve as the years go on. And when you think about it, I don't think it's a coincidence that The Warriors has been so massively popular over the years. Aside from it just being a fun read with a well-defined world, it goes back to my point earlier about how the world, fandom, and books here are so massive that there's space for everyone to truly make it their own, from making animation to writing content for their own MCs or just reading the books. I think this was helped along with the series exploding during basically the perfect time back in the early 2000s, where so many people were looking for the next big book series after Harry Potter. Even if the books weren't exactly literary masterpieces, they were further propelled by the fandom itself, which has to be one of the largest and most passionate ever. And they kind of perpetually propel it forward and put energy back into the franchise with new drama, fan works, and just keeping it in the spotlight. And it's great that the authors have tried their best to embrace the fandom. They're constantly holding events and competitions, like a recent one that Barnes & Noble held, to school competitions where students can name their own characters, and they even have an entire section of the website dedicated to fan art. But all that aside, I think the biggest and most important reason why this franchise has stuck around through thick and thin is, well, it's about cats, and I guess people really like cats. But for whatever reason, Warrior Cats is still going strong, and I for one am looking forward to the new books, fan creations, and inevitable drama in the future. Thanks so much for watching. I want to give a huge shout out to Dawnwings Channel, who helped me tremendously with this video. And if you're a fan of Warriors, they have a ton of great stuff on their channel. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons who keep this channel alive. If you're interested in becoming one, check out my description below. As always, if you have any suggestions about what you want me to cover next, just drop a comment. It's always really interesting to hear what you guys have to say. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.